All right, welcome in everyone to the deep dive. We're taking a look at something pretty fascinating today. It's a chapter, actually. It's called School Days Were Happy Days.
Interesting title.
Yeah, it is interesting, especially when you consider, well, you'll see. It's part of a larger personal story. And, it really dives into this author's childhood, gets into some heavy stuff, really. Family dynamics, mental health struggles, all that. But it also shows how resilient people can be. And I think that's what we're going to try to really pull out of this deep dive today to see how these experiences, these formative years, well, how they shaped this person's life.
It's so true. I mean, looking back on childhood, it's almost like a blueprint in a way.
Right.
The good times, the tough times, it all plays a role in who we end up being. And even in this chapter, even with a title like School Days Were Happy Days, you start to see these little hints of those complexities, these hardships that are coming.
Yeah, exactly. And, it starts pretty innocently. The author talks about preschool, Goodwill CUM preschool, consistently late. Apparently, it was often during assembly. Can you believe that?
Kids filtering in while everyone's trying to, have an assembly.
Yeah. And Auntie Budo, she's kind of a key player in these early memories. So who was she and what was her role?
Well, we find out she's the author's father's aunt and was living with them. And it sounds like she was the one tasked with getting the author to preschool,
Hmm.
but yeah, not always on time. And there's this interesting detail about Auntie Budo, about her room specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's this mention of a distinct smell, like a stench of alcohol, it says. So, just gives you a little glimpse into her personal life, her habits. And it also sets the scene, right, for the environment the author was growing up in.
It does, yeah. It's like sensory detail that just sticks with you. And speaking of being there, physically present, the author, even though they were too young at the time, talks about tagging along with their older siblings to primary school.
Hmm. I wonder what that was about.
Right. The text says, too young for unknown reasons, but still there. What do you think that says, about the situation?
Well, could be a few things. Maybe a lack of a reliable adult to watch over them,
Hmm.
or just, that natural thing, younger siblings wanting to be with the older ones, looking up to them, imitating them.
Makes sense.
Plus, they all walked everywhere together, apparently. Down the hillside, to school, to church, into the city. So you can imagine the bond that creates just from that shared experience alone.
Oh, absolutely. And then things shift. Things get a little more, well, a little more difficult. The author's about 5 years old at this point, and we start hearing about their mother's mental health struggles.
Yeah, having to leave school early because their mother wanted them home. You can imagine how unsettling that must have been for a 5-year-old, not really understanding what's happening, the dynamics of the illness, the author called it, where it came from, what it all meant.
And even with all that going on, the author talks about their mother recovering, at least for a while, with the help of, I think it was a neighborhood nurse.
Right. And what struck me was the way the author describes her mom.
Hmm.
Despite everything, despite these unspoken hardships she was dealing with, she's still remembered as this loving, resilient person. It's pretty powerful.
It is. And, even though the chapter touches on it briefly, it's worth noting that the author had to repeat standard two, but then went on to excel in the later years of primary school. I can't help but wonder, did the situation at home, did all that play a role in those early academic struggles?
Oh, I'm sure it did.
Hmm.
Imagine trying to focus on school when there's so much going on at home.
Yeah.
It's a lot for a kid to process, to handle. It makes sense that once things stabilized a bit, they were able to thrive academically.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And then another big change hits. The parents get divorced and the older siblings, they end up moving to Portsmouth for high school. So that's got to be another big adjustment for everybody.
Absolutely. You lose that close bond, that daily connection with your siblings.
Mhm.
And it just changes the whole family dynamic, right? There's a really interesting question the author brings up here.
Yeah.
They wonder, could could the father leaving, could that have been a trigger for the mother's mental health to decline again?
Yeah.
Especially because she had experienced, well, we'd call it postpartum depression now after giving birth before.
Right, that connection between major life events and mental well-being.
Exactly. It just highlights how much those things can impact us, especially if there's already a vulnerability there.
And sadly, it does seem like the mother's health does take a turn for the worse around this time, and now we're into the latter part of primary school for the author, and it's tough, really tough.
It is not only dealing with the situation at home, but also being bullied at school.
Mm.
I mean, the author talks about this fear of walking home because of this one particular classmate.
Mm.
And it's just It's heartbreaking to think about a kid being targeted like that in a place that should feel safe.
It's awful. And it's interesting, the author talks about their dad, about how they thought, well, if I just tell him about the bully, he'll protect me. He'll fix it.
That's a natural instinct, right, to look to your parents for protection.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
then there's this really poignant moment.
Hmm.
The author's visiting their dad in Portsmouth. He's moved on, started a new life, and they find this unanswered letter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a letter they had written, pleading for help, just lying there on the ground. And it's almost like this realization hits them, like, okay, I'm on my own here. I have to fight my own battles.
That must have been crushing. To feel so abandoned by the one person you're supposed to be able to rely on. It's almost like a forced independence born out of necessity, not choice.
Yeah, exactly. A tough lesson to learn so young. And sadly, the bullying doesn't stop when the author starts high school, but there's this mention of a friend, a protective friend with, get this, a compass.
A compass. Well, because you never know when you'll need to find your way.
Right. But seriously, it's like this little symbol of hope, a friend who has your back, a tool to navigate through tough times.
Absolutely. Sometimes those small things can make a world of difference.
And then there's another big shift. The author moves in with their dad. And you get the sense it wasn't exactly what they expected. They start their fourth year of high school in Portsmouth, which is, like 45 minutes away from their old life.
Yeah, 45 minutes every day. And at first, the transportation was unreliable. The author talks about walking, a lot of walking, being exhausted, feeling weak. I mean, that's a lot to add on top of everything else.
It's a lot. And, it sounds like the home environment was pretty different, too. Like, they describe it as a business-oriented household. So not a lot of focus on, family meals, that kind of thing.
Right. It sounds like basic needs, even something like regular healthy meals, weren't really a priority in that environment. And that could be really tough, especially for a teenager.
And, at first the author is excited to help out, to work at the family mini mart, feels good to contribute. But then the author realizes that they're not getting paid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the step-siblings are for doing the same work. So that sense of purpose, of being valued, it just kind of evaporates. There's this line that really struck me. The author says they should have been more than grateful just to have a roof over their head in their own father's house.
Ouch. That's rough.
It is. It just shows how much they were being taken advantage of, and how that can really mess with your sense of self-worth.
Absolutely. You're not even getting basic respect, let alone fair treatment.
Right. So the author, being the resourceful person they are, comes up with this plan. They call it their self-taught economist strategy.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the strategy?
Basically, they use the travel allowance for visiting their mom to buy things they need, school supplies, essentials. It's pretty clever.
It is. It's also kind of sad, though, that they have to resort to that.
It is. And eventually the dad catches on and puts a stop to it, which, just reinforces that sense of not having a stable support system.
Exactly. One step forward, two steps back.
And then things take another turn. The relationship with the dad, it deteriorates. The author starts to actually feel him. And the stepmother, well, she's not making things any easier.
What happened?
There's this one comment the stepmother makes, and it's awful. She tells the author she wishes they were her mother. Like, can you imagine?
That's just cruel. Intentionally hurtful.
It is. And the dad, he doesn't seem to notice, or maybe he just doesn't care. Either way, it creates this toxic environment where the author feels like an outsider. They talk about seeing their step-siblings living these privileged lives, and they're on the outside looking in.
It's like a constant reminder that they don't belong.
Exactly. And then there's this bizarre incident. It's so strange. I almost don't know what to make of it. It involves a bottle of grape juice and an accusation of witchcraft.
Witchcraft.
I know, it sounds crazy, right? But the stepmother actually accuses the author of using witchcraft because of this bottle of grape juice.
What? That's so out there.
It really is. And it gets weirder. Apparently, the stepmother's cousin had been saying that the author used witchcraft to marry their dad.
Oh, come on.
I know, it's so strange. But it gives you a glimpse into the stepmother's mindset, right? This paranoia, the suspicion. And the author, in the midst of all this, they have this incredibly insightful thought. They wonder, why would I want to harm someone who makes my dad happy?
It shows a level of maturity that's, well, It's kind of astounding given everything they're going through.
It really does. And sadly, this whole incident just makes things worse with the dad. He becomes more distant, more angry. The author even talks about him being influenced by, the people around him.
It's like he's choosing their negativity over his own child's well-being.
Yeah. And it gets petty. The stepmother complains about the author using the typewriter, using the sewing machine. It's like they're looking for things to be upset about.
And the author starts to feel like a project for the stepmother. Like they're constantly being molded, shaped into something they're not. It's dehumanizing.
It is. And it's not just emotional abuse. The author talks about not being allowed to eat at the dad's new restaurant. Their room becomes their hiding place. It's this increasingly isolating and neglectful environment.
Like basic needs aren't being met. Food, shelter, emotional support, none of it.
Yeah. And it gets to the point where the author is stealing bread and butter icing, washing it down with soda, just to get through the day.
And it goes on for months before anyone notices.
Months. They end up getting diagnosed with anemia. And to add insult to injury, the stepbrother publicly humiliates them about their cooking skills.
Oh, that's just piling on at this point.
It is, and the author's mental health is really suffering. They talk about feeling like a terrible person, like they deserve this treatment. It's heartbreaking to read.
It's the kind of experience that can really warp your sense of self.
Absolutely. And then there's this incident with the stepbrother where the author is accused of saying he was sexually harassing them.
What?
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And in the midst of it all, the author finally tries to tell their dad the truth. The truth about the harassment they've been enduring.
And how does he react?
Well, at first. More accusations, more disbelief. It's incredibly frustrating. But then, and this is a big but, the dad, he finally stands up for the author. He acknowledges their feelings. He seems to finally see what's been happening.
Not about time.
It is. And it seems like that moment, it shifts something. There's a car ride to Kabritz National Park. And during this ride, the author asks their dad for a chance. They say, if I pass my CXC exams, can I go to university?
Wow. Talk about taking control of your own destiny.
Right. And the amazing thing is they pass 6 subjects. And the dad, he keeps his word. They get to go to university. It's this glimmer of hope, this chance for a better future.
It's incredible. What a testament to resilience.
It really is. And that brings us to the end of this chapter. School days were happy days, which, as you can see, wasn't always the case. But there's so much more to this story, and I really encourage you to check out the full book, Bravo Dale, to get the full picture.
It's a powerful story. And you know what really stands out is the author's resilience. Through all these challenges, they found ways to cope, to endure, and ultimately to create a better life for themselves.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What strength do we all have inside us waiting to be discovered when times get tough? It's a question worth pondering. Maybe we're all a lot stronger than we realize. Thanks for joining us today on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.